Welcome to Surgeon Syndicate. If you're paying attention, you know that you only make money when you work. It might be great money, but it's dependent on you. The information on this podcast will help you solve that. We interview experts and provide analysis into financial freedom through commercial real estate. Why? To help physicians like you thrive. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Surgeon Syndicate. This is your host, Dr. Michael McManus. We are here today with Micah Nicholes. Micah is a serial entrepreneur and owner of US Lead List. Their core focus is to bring to market the best leads centered around inheritance. Great marketing makes great companies. They pride themselves in efforts they make to be part of great real estate companies. Micah grew up in Oregon and Idaho. His family is central to his existence. He has 4 wonderful children and a wife who he is forever indebted to for working so hard to bring up the children in the best way he can imagine. Micah currently lives in Madison, Wisconsin. His goal in the family is to help others in the space grow through collaboration. Micah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, so to get started here, tell us a little bit more about your journey into real estate. How you got started, how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, thanks again for having me, and I appreciate just the moment to speak a little bit about my story. So, yeah, probably a slightly different path to at least some of your listeners who, dedicated a really significant chunk of their life to education, getting a really high, paying job and doing well. Like I kind of had the education of hard knocks. I did a bunch of different things. I've had construction companies. I've had I still have a farm, and got into real estate just as a means to I saw an opportunity and took it, and then it ended up just leading me down a path that I'm just blown away at where I am now. So yeah, started with a couple multi-units, 4-unit, 5-unit, bought kind of in the recovery of the last downturn, and did really well with those. And then I actually sold them to purchase the business that I operate now, US Lead List. And it was a really natural integration that we basically do lead gen for investors, lands, some commercial, but mostly single family investors across the nation. And really what we're experts at is aligning, death data with real estate ownership. And so that's what the company's about. But I've got a small multifamily. I do a good amount of wholesaling, and just kind of limited flips here and there as a secondary hat to my main business.
So that's pretty cool. The school of hard knocks, you're right. Like, from the doctor standpoint, we kind of went on it's a tough educational path, but there's kind of a guaranteed outcome on the other side where I've got a lot of respect for people who kind of took the unknown path and went and did the work without a guaranteed outcome on the other side. What types of things? I just always love the backstory. So just how, as you came along, when you said you started investing in real estate after the last big downturn, what were some of the things you learned along the way in that school of hard knocks that really have benefited you now?
Yeah, sure. God, that's a big open-ended question, but I think probably a lot of what I guess the fabric where I came from comes from my childhood. I'm one of 7. My dad was a truck driver, and we were just dirt poor. We lived in just outside of Boise, Idaho, basically with all the immigrants who harvested the potatoes that everyone knows the state for. And so nothing was free in my life when I was a kid. I earned everything I got. I had to figure out a way to provide for myself at a really young age. And the hard knocks, you just end up having to be responsible for yourself in a different capacity at a different time frame in your life. And so for me, that just started really young. And I think that was one of the foundational things in my life that's really just kind of helped usher me from a place of poverty to having assets, having a cool business, and getting to interact with cool people like you, because I just don't think it would have happened otherwise.
So when you grow up poor and you're kind of taking care of your own stuff at an early age, because if you want a new bicycle or whatever, that oftentimes you have to go find a way to find that money. It's not just, hey, Dad, can I have a new bike? So how old were you when you had your first job?
Oh man, I was like 5. First paying job. We would put and like, this is so dangerous. Like, they outlawed this now, but we would put electrodes in the ground and water the ground and collect harvest night crawlers and sell them to a local bait shop.
Wow. So there's actually a law against doing that.
I don't think they make those specific. I don't even know what they're called. Worm harvesters anymore. I think they were.
Oh, really? So this
I
was some product you would buy.
Oh yeah. That puts a pulse in the ground, and if you contacted the soil close by, you'd get electrocuted, and so and that's what they were responding to. They were trying to prevent themselves from being electrocuted, so they go to the surface, and I'd run around, gather them up, and then sell them by the pound to a bait store.
Wow. And that's when you were like 5 years old.
I was really young.
That's awesome. So what was the worst job you had along the way?
Oof, worst job. I don't feel like I had a worse job, like none that stuck out where I was just like, every day it was drudgery. It was incremental. I worked in restaurants. And so, a bad day at a restaurant where you're underprepared, things don't go your way. There's so many variables in a restaurant that most people don't realize. It was really hard and stressful, and just could be awful depending on the clients that you were serving. So no vicious job that really stuck out, but yeah, days at the restaurant were tough. That was
Pretty tough.
Unenviable spot to be in, and you just deal with it.
But my first job outside of the house and doing little chores was cleaning pig farrowing crates for a guy down the road. So I always said,
that is a job.
If one of your early jobs, if the first time you get paid for messing with poop, there's a lot of room to go up from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know about pigs. I had a pig farm, right? I mean, I still have the farm, but I don't have pigs anymore. And that was a cool operation. We were taking pigs, working with the local distillery, feeding them out, and they're basically the Wagyu beef of pigs, and shipping them kind of all over the country. That was as I was transitioning out of restaurants and trying to fill some sort of niche as a supplier. It didn't work out as well, but it was fun. I liked the pigs. I didn't like the poop.
So how old were you when you started your first business?
First business, gosh, I mean, I had a lot of failed attempts that weren't even a business yet. And so, I owned a sawmill. I was doing portable sawmilling. I had this farm operation. I had a construction company. So basically through my 20s, I did a lot of exploration of just, ways that I could kind of carve out something that worked. And all those things worked, but not well enough that I was satisfied. I wasn't writing home to my parents saying, look at the successes that I got. And not that that's what it was about, but it was like, it was still hard work. And I basically created a job for myself. And so honestly, the first real business, as far as, being able to have a business process and extract myself out of it and still have it work for me, was when I purchased this company, US Leadless.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what would you tell, because this is the interesting thing, because myself, as moving away from being a surgeon, and I hear this from a lot of doctors right now. So there's a lot of doctors who aren't really happy in the system and the way the system has changed, and kind of what their job has become. But it's really hard when you went to school for 10, 20 years between residency and everything else. And then you got this really good job, and now you're not happy in the job, and to go do something else, for the vast majority of doctors can be overwhelming. And I think, and for me, as I went through the process, there was a certain amount of jealousy for the people who spent their 20s being entrepreneurs and kind of going all over, because you learned so much about starting a company or about doing different things, and the ability to, to fail or have it not work out perfect. You get better at that, where, as doctors, for a lot of us, we didn't fail a whole lot in life. You went to school, you got good grades, you got to go to the next school and get good grades, and go to the next school and get good grades, and then you're a doctor.
Yeah.
And if you failed along the way, you ended up getting kicked off that path.
Sure.
And so it can be hard to go in and do something that really risks failure. What would be your advice to any doctor who's listening, or anybody else who may have been more on this education-based success pathway that now want to do something different? It's a big, scary world out there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can only speak to it because, I think that similarly, when I bought this business, unless you're buying it cash, the ramifications of failure are pretty significant. And so, kind of like becoming a doctor, it's like, you're not burning all the bridges, but I mean, you're committing yourself in a pretty full way where failure is almost not an option. My recommendation is, if you are thinking about something different, figure out what that might be and burn the bridges and go down that path and do literally whatever it takes to arrive at, your predefined success. Because the tenacity of an intelligible human, especially doctors, the programming may have been a little bit different to get there, but if you're committed to an outcome, you'll ultimately receive it. You get there in one way. It might not look how you thought it would look, but you get there in the end.
Maybe that's the big hurdle, because the tenacity it takes to get through medical school, to get through residency, there's a lot of hard times along the way. And maybe I think it's made easier because the end is known, where,
Mhm.
like you were saying, that in your case, the tenacity's the same, or maybe it's more. Um,
Who
and
am I to say? I don't know.
you get someplace that turns out, if you work hard enough at it and you learn from your mistakes, you're going to get someplace that's going to be success. But it might end up being something different than your initial goal was. And maybe that's the viewpoint that's harder for somebody who before was putting hard work into getting to a known result versus an unknown result.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Because, in my business, it's like I got it and it was one thing, right? And pretty much it's just been small pivots into, basically the same thing, but a different angle, to grow, to continue to make it better, to, find more opportunity and exploit the good thing that myself and my team can create to help other people do more business.
That's awesome. So I'm going to jump back a little bit. So in your bio, and as you're saying, you came from a family of 7 kids,
Yeah.
and so I came from a family of 6. So it's where were you in the order there?
I was fourth oldest, third youngest. So I'm basically in the middle. The neglected.
Okay, in the middle. Yeah, were you? It's and in a big family, then it's often that there is a little bit of being, they talk about middle child syndrome or whatever, or a little bit being lost. Yeah, because you don't have the power of being the older kid, you don't have the protection of being the younger kid, and some people might have felt lost. What I felt was freedom. Like nobody, I could get away with a lot. Like
Yeah, for better or worse, right? Like,
you're,
I
you're
totally
hiding in the middle.
Yep, precisely. Yeah, I mean, there's downsides to the middle, but there definitely upsides in that, the levity that I had kind of to move between my family was pretty great, and there was a lot of different things to ping off a good amount of people on either end of those spectrums.
So now you mentioned a lot that being a dad is a big part of what you do. How many kids do you have?
4 kids.
4 kids, boys, girls?
I have 2 of each.
Two of each. All right, you got a good mix. How big of an age spread?
16, 14, 12, 2.5.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
kind of like my family when I was a kid. We had
Really? You had
four within 5 years of each other, and then one that was 10 years later, and then 4 years after that again.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay.
so
Yeah.
I
It wasn't necessarily planned, but it's a welcome and wonderful addition.
awesome. I mean, I have an 18 and 19-year-old. I think having it at the point of when our youngest was 12, if we had another, man, that's like, okay, we're going to have to reset our whole perspective of the world now.
Yeah, we got scared away. Like we had complications on the third one and had to have a emergency cesarean, and it was a tough go. And after that, we're like, okay, we did good. We got out unscathed, and definitely made the thought of considering more kids challenging.
So with the kids, how is and I think that's I actually, when I went to medical school, is kind of when it was like looking at starting a family, and I was looking for something more stable.
Yeah.
I mean, really, and then in fact, we had kids during residency when we had no money, and it was just a crazy time.
Hmm.
Um, so with running a real estate, or tell me, what kind of lessons have you learned from your family, or how do you balance the kids and everything else?
What is absolutely amazing about having a W-2 job is that, when you leave, you're done, for the most part. And that actually may be a little bit different for a fair amount of doctors. But, um, as an entrepreneur and, basically being a self-starter of one, work doesn't really go away. That family line gets blended a lot. And, it still causes friction. Last night, my wife's like, "Why are you checking your phone again?" And I'm sure I could have come up with some good reasons, but there wasn't any good reason at this point in my career that I needed to, but force a habit. Um, so that can be complicated, because when you become the owner of something, it's like you're the last person that gets paid. You're the first person that hears about the biggest problems. It's you're kind of managing a small little government of people who hopefully are doing well enough to make some pay to take home after your work ends. And so there's definitely a season of hustle, I would say, where you kind of just got to do whatever you need to do to put all those pieces together. And then, at some point, there's enough. It's kind of like having a W-2 job again, and you can check out. The systems are lined up. The folks who are supporting you know what to do, and you don't have to pull the strings anymore nearly as much as you would have. And so I think that um, if anyone is considering that path of either entrepreneurship or creating something from be it in real estate investments or something of the sort, there's pains that go along with it, unless you are strictly, putting your money to work in a syndication, and that's pretty clean, right? There's a lot to be said for just having an expert manage that capital and still getting all those great benefits of real estate and not having to do the work.
So now your oldest kid, 16, so they're in the middle of high school. They're starting to think about what they want to do with their life. What are their thoughts on what you do? Are they attracted to the entrepreneurial life, or are they looking for something different?
It's a mixture. The boys, they're much more open to the concept of, how did dad do it? How can that work? How can I create that? My daughter, the oldest one, she's excited about education beyond high school and plans, something of the sort. But I don't see her pursuing the same path that I have. The boys more so. I think they do ask really, pretty wise questions for their age of, well, dad, what's it, you know, I'm thinking about going into this field. What is that job like? I was like, well, and I kind of just break that down for them, and I'm like, and so how, dad, could I do it so I don't actually have a job? They're posing these pretty big questions of like, is there another path? Because there is, right? maybe you go to school and you're an engineer or you're a doctor, and you figure out a way to monetize yourself at the beginning and then create a system for other people either working for you, doing that work for you, where you're basically kind of in command and get to be the person pulling the strings rather than the other way around. And I think that's been a real blessing to have them be able to observe that process from a young age and ask those questions as they're trying to, wrestle with their identity, their own personal desires, what they want, what they think they might be, and all those things. Because if you're not careful, you can plan your whole life around a great job and arrive there and realize it's maybe not what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and that's tough, especially if you've spent, over a decade getting there.
Absolutely.
And so you're in Madison, Wisconsin. So what's it been like as far as the effect on them of being in a major college town?
For my kids specifically, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess for you and for the family, when they're looking at that defined college path versus, the school of hard knocks.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to weigh in too heavily. For me, like, education is really valuable. It's just my own personal belief around that, and I think there's a great time for it. One of the things that I question is if the personal exploration of a young adult should be at college, and so I'm always interjecting that concept to my kids, like, well, that's fine, like, great, if you want to go to school, that's fine, but why? What's the purpose? What's the function? And just asking that question inserts enough doubt, like, oh, well, I mean, I thought that's what other people did. Or like, yeah, a lot of people do that, but why? And so I think it's been really useful just pinging that back to them so they have a sense of identity of what they're doing. They have a purpose. That it's like in the minutia of the world right now, there's so much information, there's so many things. It's like, this is a personal observation, is like sometimes I just kind of forget where I'm going, even because I'm inundated from so many different things.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I tried to maybe push my kids away from going to school, but there's such great opportunity in the trades right now. I mean, the money somebody can make going down the plumber, HVAC, any of those roads, and can go to college later if they want to. But it's man, I think it's hard to catch up after you spend 4 years in college and $100,000, versus the kid who goes right to work in one of these trades and then ends up owning a business. And it's an interesting time. I think it's kind of changed of what's the value of going to college. And I like your question, because if you don't have a purpose for what you're spending that money, why you're going there, it can be, it's like digging a hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a harder place to start from, for sure.
So, all right. Well, thank you, Micah. This has been a great conversation and some really interesting things of, taking a little different road than most of us doctors did. And so the second half of our conversation, I'd like to invite you to come back for the second half of this interview with Micah Nicholes. We're going to dive into his real estate operations now a little more and learn about U.S. lead lists and everything he's doing and what kind of services they provide. So, Micah, thank you for joining us. And to everybody listening, please join us for the next episode of Surgeon Syndicate. This has been an episode of Surgeon Syndicate. If you got value from this episode, other surgeons are hungry to become job optional, and you can help them by sharing this content today. Schedule a call and we can make a plan. Looking forward to having you with me on the next episode.